Welcome to the Spitzen-Körper Thelema. We are examining a text that belongs to a 19th century current of thought rarely discussed today, one that attempted to reconstruct Western esotericism by collapsing historical boundaries and tracing all mystery traditions back to a single Asiatic source. Edward Pococke, writing in the Atlantic Monthly in 1859, was part of a loosely affiliated movement of scholars and initiates who believed that Greek civilization, including its most sacred rites, had been colonized by Vedic and Buddhist priesthoods from Central Asia and the Himalayan regions. This was not fringe thinking at the time. Madame Blavatsky, whose *Secret Doctrine* would appear in 1888, inherited and amplified these ideas. What made Pococke's work distinctive was its philological method to offer traced Sanskrit etymologies through Greek terms, arguing that the corruptions of language reflected the corruptions of doctrine. The Eleusinian mysteries, in this reading, were not Greek inventions. They were a degraded form of a primordial Lamaic system, a Buddhistic administration of truth that had descended from the high plateaus of Tibet through Thessaly and into Attica. The passage we are about to read opens with a polemic against the complacency of modern scholarship, then shifts into an immersive reconstruction of the 9-day festival at Eleusis, culminating in an explicit claim that initiates were required to have been *veiled- before becoming *southeasters. The wording is crucial. To see, one must first be blind. This current of thought, called comparative mysticism, or Oriental reconstruction, positioned itself against Enlightenment rationalism on one flank and against Christian orthodoxy on the other. Pococke was arguing that the most sacred institution of classical Greece was, at its core, a missionary outpost of Asian wisdom religion. The mysteries had lasted nearly 2,000 years not because they were theatrical entertainment, but because they transmitted something real. And yet, the mysteries had been systematically destroyed. The text we will read contains two distinct arguments. First, a historical narrative of the fall, how the mysteries were corrupted by commercialism, suppressed by the Macedonians, and finally abolished in 396 CE by Christian edict. Second, an etymological archaeology. Names like Zeus derive from Zeus, the Grand Lama, Zagreus from Chakras, Demeter from Buddhist missionaries, Poseidon from Poseidon, Prince of Saints. If correct, this etymology rewrites the entire symbolic vocabulary of Greek religion as a palimpsest of Sanskrit and Tibetan terms. The archive contains this text because it marks a pivotal moment when Western esotericists ceased treating classical antiquity as a self-contained civilization and began reading it as a corrupted transmission of Eastern gnosis. Here is the passage. Then the keystone of the arch was knocked out and all that was sacred was given up to mockery. The mysteries of the Jews were identical with those of pagan Greeks, who took them from the Egyptians, who borrowed them from the Chaldeans, who got them from the Aryans, who inherited them from the Atlanteans, and so on. But what gods and angels had revealed, esoteric religions, beginning with that of Moses, reviled, revealed, and hid for ages from the sight of the world. The lure of lucre was the final nail in the coffin of the Eleusinian. An Athenian demagogue and sycophant, whose eloquence was described as of a coarse and vehement character, degraded the sacred mysteries by persuading the state to levy a charge for those seeking admission to higher life. Thus initiation had become a commodity and as necessary as baptism it has since become with the Christians. Only the Adept, who see things as they truly are, have preserved the sacred doctrines. The Miste, who knew them only superficially, laid the first foundation stone of modern masonry, and it is from this half-pagan, half-converted primitive fraternity of Masons that Christian ritualism and most of their dogmas were born. The first hour for the demise of the mysteries struck on the clock of the races with the Macedonian conqueror. The first strokes of its last hour sounded in 47 BCE in the Thebes of the Celts. But the mysteries of Eleusis could not be so easily disposed of. They were indeed the religion of mankind, and shone in all their ancient splendor if not in their primitive purity. It took several centuries to abolish them, and they could not be entirely suppressed before the year 396 of our era. Alas! The Eleusinian mysteries are no more. Universal myths are personifications of powers divine and cosmic, primary and secondary. Their figures are infused with a vital spirit which, like the light within a lantern, shines out through their many-colored fantasies. Prehistoric Greece was colonized by two great Indian races, the solar and the lunar dynasties. Springing up from the kingdoms of Kashmir and Tibet, the prehistoric colonists of Greece consisted of the two great primitive and radical races of Aryavarta, the solar or ancient Buddhistic dynasty, and the lunar dynasty. The former were the earliest settlers in Greece and their religious exponents appear to have been the Dogon, or Brahmanical priests of the great tribe, Doda. As history progressed, the original Lamaic system of religion has been so much modified and so far compromised, as to be compelled to seek refuge in the asylum of the Grecian mysteries, instead of the state position it once occupied. The Lamaic system, originating on the high tract of land in the vicinity of the Himalayan frontier of Tibet, had taken up a strong position to the north of Thessaly, on the Adrian mountain range, before descending into northern Greece, under the auspices of the Dalai Lamas. This gigantic system of ancient Hellas was administered from that lofty mountain which was called Olympos by the later Greeks Patulampos, or High Lama chiefs, by the original settlers. With the passing of time, the settlers corrupted Jayus or Grand Lama, to Zeus, and Chakras, the horned child and favorite son of Zeus by his daughter, Kori Persephone or Guru Parasapani, to Zagreus. Inside Greece, Bacchus was a prosonym of Zagreus, the successor of the Lamaic sovereignty in whose service was Orpheus, the founder of the mysteries. Outside Greece, Bacchus was the Tartarian Jupiter Hammon whose Lamaic worship accompanied the emigrants of Tartary to Egypt. The aloof chiefs, who spread the Lamaic doctrines in the Attic territory, became Eleusinae. Their forms of worship and Tartar ceremonials composed the staple of the celebrated Eleusinian mysteries. Pococke, the great Buddhistic pontiff, styled Ikshvaku by the Hindus, became Ojibwas. Eleusinia were the holiest and most venerable of all mysteries in Greece. They were connected with the fertile Rarian plain near Athens that was named after the Rarnhaya division of the five principal Brahmanical tribes. The highborn Brahmins or Kulini lived on the Peloponnesian Mount Selene. The mysteries were communicated to Kuliseleus, ruler of the land of the Rarnhaya, by Demeter herself. The lesser mysteries were celebrated in honor of Parasupani Persephone in February, the greater, in honor of Buddhist missionary Demeter in August. Yet the Greeks besmirched their noble ancestry by belittling their hierophants as troglodytes. Three hierarchs represented Buddhistical and Brahmanical power, while the political power of Sri Ptolemos or Triptolemos was formidable. The cave-dwelling Buddhist priests or Srukuladuta, lords of the cave, who protected their secret doctrines from profanation, are today belittled as troglodytai. The mysterious name of Anjayathan was also derived from Ayuan, the triple fire representing the highest tetractys. Erectus Poseidon was worshipped jointly with Athen. Erectus is identified with Poseidon or Poseidon, Prince of all saints, Chief of Sidon, and Prince of Sidon. The passage then turns to the experiential heart of the mysteries themselves. There were 9 days of the festival. This first is the day of the Agiamos, or assembling together the flux of Grecian life into the secret chambers of its Eleusinian heart. Tomorrow is the day of purification. Then, to the sea, all ye that are initiated, lest any come with the stain of impurity to the mysteries of God. The third day is the day of sacrifices, that the heart also may be made pure, when are offered barley from the fields of Eleusis and Amalite. All other sacrifices may be tasted, but this is for Demeter alone, and not to be touched by mortal lips. On the fourth day, we join the procession bearing the sacred basket of the goddess, filled with curious symbols, grains of salt, card wool, sesame, pomegranates, and poppies, symbols of the gifts of our Great Mother and of her mighty sorrow. On the night of the 5th, we are lost in the hurrying tumult of the torchlight processions. Then there is the 6th day, the great day of all, when from Athens the statue of Iacchus is born, crowned with myrtle, tumultuously through the sacred gate, along the sacred way, halting by the sacred fig tree, where the procession rests, and then moves on to the bridge over the Cephasus, where again it rests, and where the expression of the wildest grief gives place to the trifling farce, even as Demeter, in the midst of her grief, smiled at the levity of Iambe in the palace of Seleucus. Through the mystical entrance we enter Eleusis. On the 7th day, games are celebrated, and to the victor is given a measure of barley, as it were a gift direct from the hand of the goddess. The 8th is sacred to Aesculapius, the divine physician, who heals all diseases, and in the evening is performed the initiatory ritual. We must have been veiled before we can become epoch southeasters. In plain English, we must have shut our eyes to all else before we can behold the mysteries. Crowned with myrtle, we enter with the oath. The argument here is twofold and works at different registers. On the surface, Pococke is asserting a genealogy. All Western mystery religion derives from Asian sources, corrupted and compressed into Greek institutional forms. The keystone was knocked out, meaning the pure doctrine was replaced by esoteric distortion. But beneath that lies a subtler claim about the structure of initiation itself. The mysteries lasted because they preserved a two-tiered system. The Mystae, the veiled ones, received outer teachings. The Epata, the Southeasters, alone possessed the real gnosis. This structure did not originate in Greece. It was imported. The names changed, Jayus to Zeus, Chakras to Zagrus, but the hierarchy of knowledge remained. What Pococke could not fully acknowledge, given the intellectual constraints of 1859, was that this framework was being used to legitimize contemporary esoteric orders. If the Eleusinian mysteries had always been an Asiatic transmission system, then modern Masonry, Rosicrucianism, and Theosophy could claim unbroken descent. They were not novel fabrications. They were resurrections. The text mutated from earlier theosophical speculation, notably from the work of Louis Claude de Saint Martin and Martinus de Pasquale in the 18th century, but it seeded the entire corpus of late 19th century comparative mysticism. Blavatsky cited this type of material directly. H.P. Lovecraft, decades later, drew on it for his mythopoeia. The Pococke method, tracing Sanskrit roots through European languages as evidence of Asiatic conquest and doctrine, became canonical in esoteric scholarship, even as its historical foundations crumbled. The power of the argument lay not in its accuracy but in its promise, that modernity had not severed us from primordial wisdom, only buried it. Initiation meant becoming conscious of that burial. Seeing meant learning to read the corrupted names as if they were still sacred. Next, Madame Blavatsky *, the secret doctrine *, the Spitzen-Körper Thelema. If this archive serves you, support it on Patreon. Link in the description.